how to fix an upside down Zoom screen in just a few easy steps.
Hold on, we're going live, Marilyn. Cut that out. So we're having some technical difficulties as we're starting the show. You Be the Judge. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. We have our co-host, Judge Claudia Barber, and Marilyn Pierre, who's running for a circuit court judge in Montgomery County. Welcome to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. You can catch us all on all your podcast channels, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, wherever you catch your podcast channel. You also catch us live on YouTube and Facebook and things like that. So as we get going, know where you can go. We're in social media age. So if you don't know where we are, shame on you. That's your fault. It's not really ours because we're out there. And we can always see the recordings, hear the podcast, and that is what we've been doing. God, Judge Claudia Barber, we have a co-host, Marilyn Pierre, who is upside down today. It's actually metaphorically funny, since our world is pretty much upside down. It just seems funny that there it is.
You're making fun of me. I might as well show everyone. But that's all. That's all the show that you're going to get. I'm going to work on this while I listen to you guys.
So while we have one of our co-hosts that's upside down, Judge Claudia Barber, how was your week? And tell us how the world is upside down. Because this mass media nonsense and propaganda, it's hurting us as an Americans. And
well, first of all, I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the invite. And I thought that last week's discussion was great. And I'm so sorry I had to leave it early to jump on another Zoom call at 6:30 p.m. But nonetheless, not to take away from all the wonderful things that were shared. Mm-hmm. I just, it's been a busy week for me. And the upside downness that you spoke of, for me, I see a lot in the news as it pertains to crime here, crime there, crime just up and down. But we still have the struggle for justice. You have this Grand Rapids, Michigan killing and no arrest.
None.
And it's worse than Walter Scott, who got shot in the back.
Right.
Because this was close range. This was execution style. It for what it appears. And then the revelation in the news that Wells Fargo has been.
You know what? I'm glad, Judge Claudia Barber, you actually read news that is that has
impactful. That's impactful.
Right.
Yes.
And so explain what Wells Fargo is doing in short.
It's easy. It's statistics.
Yeah.
The article that I read showed that there was not this huge gap in rejected applications. It was rejecting, statistic-wise, more than 80% of mortgage refinance applications, whereas other entities, and these were strictly Black applicants.
That's all they were. Period.
Yeah, strictly Black applicants. And the way it came to light is someone who owns rental property in the Atlanta, Georgia, or the Georgia area, apparently, ordinarily with his 800 credit score, would have zoomed through the refinance process. But flag the file. And to me, this is nothing more than a way of claiming. Welcome, Mary Lynn Pierre, because you're right side up this time. But
I'm trying different things. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, so nothing. So this is nothing but it appears from the story I read a scam. It appears to be. We could allegedly call it a scam, where they're redlining. Just stop telling me there's no redlining. Just stop it. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Here's the funny thing. This is a sad thing. I don't want to use the phrase funny. I read the article about how they got caught redlining. They used the word in this article, redlining, but how they were blanketing, canceling black applicants from refinancing over 80%, right? That's the article I read. So here's the thing. After the article I read, if you scroll down at any of the Wells Fargo's thing, they're saying how they're contributing to HBCU schools and how they're donating money. Deflect. And they've been doing this now prior to this coming out. If you go back several months, they knew this was coming.
First of all, can we tell people who don't know what we're talking about? Because some people, I see the look on some people's faces. They're like, what are you talking about? What we're talking about basically is that the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, finally did something that I actually agree with. He decided that he was no longer going to put New York City's money into Wells Fargo banks because of their
decision.
Yes.
Oh, you didn't know that? Okay, because of their history of discrimination of discrimination. And so Roland Martin did a great report on it, showing how some Black organizations like the NAACP, the National Urban League, Rainbow Push, and some other organizations. He said he wasn't picking on any organization in particular. What they would do is they would say, wow, look at that. Wells Fargo is giving, $50 million to Black organizations or to Black people. When in fact, when you compare the amount of money that Wells Fargo has taken out of the Black community because of their discrimination, it's in the billions. So Wells Fargo could give $50 million away by buying a table at, the NAACP Freedom Fund dinner or something of that sort. But,
that's how it's camouflage. That's how racism is camouflage.
Exactly.
And they'll come up with a thousand reasons why it's not what it is when you know it is what it is.
Exactly. And we would love to get into that some more, but we do have our guest.
We do have a guest.
That we do need to go to.
I was asked the question. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, you were, and you did answer it, and that's why I'm like, I mean, I love to hear Max speak. Max has a lot to say. We look forward to hearing him, and I've got lots of questions for him as well. So if we could get into them.
Marilyn, do you want to introduce Max?
Oh, I did not ask Max for his bio. So I know Max can speak for himself, and he's got, like I said, I've heard him speak many times before, and I look forward to hearing him speak many times again. And so I figure Max could do this on his own.
Max, welcome to You Be the Judge.
So should we do drum roll for Max?
Yeah, I will drum roll him in. Well, I want to say welcome to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and thank you for joining us. And you're always welcome back. That has nothing to do if we like you or not. It has more to do with just because of the things you have to say and you help in community. If it's pertinent, we want you to know that you're here. This is a home for you. Because you to be the judge, there's three things that I always consider very highly important. Information, understanding, and help people get into an action. So with that being said, Max, welcome to You Be the Judge.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Introduce myself. Sure. I'm a candidate for state senate in my state district, which is District 18 in Montgomery County, just over the DC line. I'm a community organizer by trade. I, many years ago, was an educator, and I got recruited by Reverend William Barber into the mass protests in North Carolina, fighting for voting rights and fighting against Republican scheme to cut the social safety net and cut taxes for the very wealthy. I went to jail with Reverend Barber, and I started to learn about organizing. I founded an organization in North Carolina before moving with my family up to DC and then Montgomery County. And during that time, I left education. I became a full-time organizer. I traveled all over the country, training folks how to do the things that I had learned to do in North Carolina in other states. So I'm a big believer in bottom-up grassroots organizing. I'm proud to be part of the broad movement for racial and economic justice in this country. I guess I can say when I came to Montgomery County, I was briefly very excited to see like, wow, everybody's a progressive Democrat in Montgomery County. It's just be a really easy place to live.
Psych.
And very quickly learned, there's what's on the label and then there's what actually happens behind closed doors. And in some ways, it made me miss North Carolina because at least there you kind of knew who your friends were. If you wanted to be a Republican, you could just be one. So here I am, first-time candidate, and I'm excited to be here and meet everybody and talk about, what we're trying to do in my district.
Well, first of all, I must say, I'm impressed with your connections with the Reverend William Barber III. My goodness, a passionate leader for social justice. Yes. And
there's not many other people who, going from hearing him speak the very first time to going to jail with him, there's only a few people in the world who could do that for me. But
there was demonstrations in actually Anne Arundel County, and some of the NAACP members that are part of the Maryland People's Poor campaign, they did follow Reverend William Barber's message to the science, and they were arrested for blocking traffic in Annapolis near the State House to protest, poor people's policies. And so that there are people in that arena in this area, and we're so glad to have you a part of this area to continue that social justice message.
So Max, and I agree, I am going to second and third, even with Marilyn. Marilyn, I know she's upside down cheering you on. But here's the thing, Max. One of the things you said that I want you to touch on before we get into other questions was that when you came to Montgomery County, Maryland, Montgomery County, there are things that are seen and there are things that are unseen. And for those of the people that's listening on a podcast and iHeart, you're a white guy. You are pretty pasty white at that. So for you to say something like that, for people to hear, what do you mean? Because sometimes when African American people say it, it still sounds like we're complaining. But when a white person says it, it's a revelation. So explain.
Yeah, and that's it's unfortunate that these kinds of comments get heard that way, depending on your own racial identity. But it's very true. I think that to give a concrete example, I guess, of what I mean, when we came to Silver Spring and we were living downtown, relatively soon after we moved to Montgomery County, a neighbor of mine, a black man, was killed by a Montgomery County police officer. And that was really my very unfortunate entry into local political matters here, because I unfortunately had been part, in the past and other places of similar situations. And I knew from my experience that, these kinds of cases tend to get buried if the community doesn't speak out about what happened. And but I thought, maybe Montgomery County will be different than it was in North Carolina. And instead, what I found is that it was very much the same. And if anything, the laws in Maryland at that time were even more draconian. State law, the so-called Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which I'm sure folks here have heard of, basically precluded local government from taking almost any kind of disciplinary or even investigatory action in a situation like the one we were facing in my neighborhood. And I'm talking about literally, a man walking on a walk through the neighborhood like he was every single day. Nobody called the police on him. Everybody knew who he was, known to his neighbors. An officer on an unrelated call driving by decides he looks suspicious, chases him down, ends up shooting him, right? So you couldn't have a more cut and dry case, of abuse of force leading to a murder. And yet the officer faced no consequences because of the state law. So for me, yes, as a white guy, as a white neighbor, joining with other neighbors in the community where I lived, to try to get some kind of justice for the man's family, ended up leading me on this multi-year odyssey where I eventually, was appointed to the county executive's task force on reimagining public safety, a year-long investigation into Montgomery County policing practices and the data, and finding that Montgomery County, is just as bad as almost any other place in this country when it comes to police abuse, very unfortunately. We're talking about, an overwhelmingly racially biased pattern of traffic stops, of use of force, of petty arrests for drug possession. It runs the gamut. And so, and I think that it's unfortunate that there are a lot of folks who live here who would not support those things if they knew about them. But if you look like me and you live in, your safe neighborhood and you have your good job and you work in DC or something, this is your, you come over the DC line to go home at night, you can afford to check out of some of these things. And unfortunately, that's what happens a lot of the time. So that's what I mean. I mean that, there are really good people in Montgomery County, really good people in my district. We have an amazing, truly multiracial society here. It's why my family love living here and why we want to stay here. But we can't pretend that that we have solved these deeply, racially patterned social problems. We have them just like any other place.
I just wanted to say on behalf of, Robert White, I know he can't speak for himself, but that's who you were talking about. The fact that you and some other activists decide that you were going to bring light to his death was just so important, because people in Montgomery County didn't think something like that could happen in Montgomery County. And even looking at the video, the first video that they put on YouTube, when they released it, they had a longer video, and it shows you the police officer getting out of the car and Robert White just walking around saying, and the police officer is asking him questions, and he's saying, leave me alone, leave me alone, leave me alone. And that's all he's saying. And this police officer is chasing him to a residential neighborhood. And that in and of itself, I found problematic, because you could see other people in the neighborhood as well in the video. And that police officer is creating a dangerous environment for those people. Not to mention for Robert White, who he eventually killed. So thank you very much for that, because somebody like Robert White, and I will keep saying his name because we need to keep saying, the names of the people who are, who find themselves in those situations. But if it weren't for you and people like you, no one would have known his name. It would have been, police officer shot someone, and that would have been it. So thank you, Max.
Well, I think that there should be some follow-up here, because you have Eric Barron, who's now the U.S. attorney in Maryland, an African-American male. And you also have a police chief in Montgomery County that's African-American. But this case needs to go into a grand jury. It sounds awful. And I'm not sure how anybody could see somebody walking in a neighborhood. That reminds me of that Colorado case of the man who lost his life after walking out of a store.
Oh,
and
yeah. Late night.
Yeah,
store,
the
right.
same scenario, just about.
Here's the thing, and Max, as you're running for state senator, there's not much you can do about that particular case. So how are you going to have a cause and effect on that type of atmosphere in Montgomery County from where you're going? Because here's the thing, we want you to go there. And a lot of people think that, good policy only comes from certain color of people. That's bullshit. Yeah, I can say it, this is my show and I'm good with that. Because good policy comes from good people. And we have to be clear on that. Good policy comes from good people. good people still sometimes cannot get through good policy. So that is probably your juggernaut with any candidate running for a large seat. And this is a large state senate. So how are you going to make good policy in a bad atmosphere like Montgomery County?
Well, I think it's important to know that the state legislature, and particularly the Senate, because there's fewer seats there, does have a surprising amount of control over what local governments are able to do vis-a-vis policing. And that's actually, the immediate cause of this campaign that I'm in. I mean, this is a multi-issue campaign. People in my district need a lot of different things, but the real way this campaign got going was that my current state senator, who I'm running against, who's very close with the police union and other interests that push pro-policing, policy. He was the linchpin Democratic senator in the Judicial Proceedings Committee, which is the committee that deals with these issues, who ended up amending the bill that we fought for years, basically gutting it from the inside. And so he was adding amendments to a bill that would have freed up local governments to do more to deal with unconstitutional policing, with things like allowing officers to expunge their records of misconduct after 3 years, meaning that if you face abuse from an officer who has a pattern of abuse, if that pattern dates back to more than 3 years, you would never know that. It wouldn't be in the record for you to find out. He was adding amendments to the bill that would have prevented chiefs of police from taking disciplinary action against officers, except under highly constrained circumstances, and similar amendments like that. So I think we should understand that there is actually a lot that state government, does control about what is possible at the local level. The other thing that I will say, and this is something that I really believe in, is that, and I take this from the case of Robert White. That was a situation where my neighborhood at that time in downtown Silver Spring simply had too many police with too little to do around bothering people. And this is something that we see in majority Black and majority Latino neighborhoods, certainly in Montgomery County. I think there's a balance, and there can be good intentions in there of wanting to provide more services to certain neighborhoods. But when what that service looks like is harassment or worse, then we have a real problem. And so one of the things that Montgomery County government, the county council, has actually unanimously asked to be able to do this, but they can't without state officials giving the okay, is to do things like reduce the amount of traffic enforcement the Montgomery County police are doing. In this day and age, we've got red light cameras, we've got speeding cameras. They're actually more effective at keeping pedestrians safe and keeping our roads safe. Yet we still rely primarily on, human police officers to do traffic enforcement. What we see in Montgomery County is that you are 3 times more likely to be pulled over. In fact, you have a 1 in 3 chance every single year of being pulled over if you are Black in this county. And that's unacceptable. That's vastly out of proportion, in terms of the racial composition of this county. And it's because, we are relying on human officers with either implicit or unfortunately sometimes explicit biases to do that work. So this is something where we actually have to change state law in order to allow the county council to change local law and actually reduce the amount of human policing that is, working on traffic enforcement. So it's one example, but there are a lot of examples like that. And so I do think there's actually a very close partnership that needs to exist between the county delegation to the legislature and the county council. But that has been hard to achieve in Montgomery County so far.
So, the interesting thing about what you're saying, you really cause us to focus and think about how significant our voting is, right. Because we have got to get out and mobilize other people to vote and take it seriously. We need candidates like Max Sokol to be seated, to win, get elected, to get to the ballot box as soon as you possibly can, mail in your request for a ballot, do whatever you got to do, but you got to vote. And you've got to put candidates in offices that have their finger on the pulse in a right way on these social justice issues.
And we got to take out candidates that have been there for more than a term or two, things have not changed. If things have not changed in a term of one term, they're not doing anything for you. And they're not going to do anything for you.
Now, see, my whole thing with this police harassment thing that state Senate candidate Max Sokol was mentioning here. See, there are a lot of policy issues that need to change. For example, what's wrong with the police chief, issuing a mandate, no more pretextual stops?
Right.
Okay. What's wrong with the police chief? Stop rewarding police officers for making a certain quantity of arrests or writing up certain citations in certain neighborhoods and targeting certain neighborhoods. That, to me, that's the root of the issue, these policies here. And to the extent that, they won't, change their ways and the way they grade officers on, you haven't made any arrests this month. So then their performance evaluation, sinks as opposed to, the other work that they do in restraining arrests or actually involving themselves to the point that they don't make an arrest. And they calm down situations instead of escalate situations until they become fatalities. So, that's where we have to organize forums so that these questions can be asked of candidates so that we know where they're coming from.
So we
have to know that.
Does anyone have a question for Max at all? Anyone? Because
well,
go ahead.
Oh, Kathy has a question. Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy.
Yes, I just want to ask the question that I asked last week, and whether or not Max is aware of the attempt to interfere by the voter integrity group with the voter registration list with the Board of Elections. Are you familiar with that attempt and whether or not the issue has been resolved?
I am familiar with that attempt because I know the county Democratic Party was responding to that and sent a tremendous number of people to the Board of Elections meeting to try to prevent that from happening. I myself could not get into the Zoom meeting because so many people joined it. So I actually don't know what the outcome was of that, but I know the county party is responding.
So we just need to try to keep monitoring the meetings to make sure that it has been resolved.
I think that's a good starting point. Make sure you're on the county party email list. They've been doing a really good job of alerting folks, of how to join those meetings and what to say.
Well, I've joined the notification list twice and have yet to receive a notification, so I'm not sure.
Really?
What's going on. Yeah.
If you want to chat me your email, I can make sure you get onto the list. I'm not sure where that happened.
Alrighty.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yes. I would like to know again what district is it District 18 that you're running for state Senate? What does that encompass?
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd district because it cuts off half of several different metro areas. So part of Silver Spring, which is where I live, the Woodside, Forest Glen neighborhoods in particular, and then north through most of Wheaton, all the way up to Glenmont. And then it runs west through all of Kensington and along the DC line to the south. So encompassing almost all of Chevy Chase and about half of Bethesda up to Rockville Pike, more or less. So North Bethesda in particular. So it's that general area where the district just west of the downtown Silver Spring Tacoma Park district, which is District 20.
Wonderful. Now, are you aware of a guest we had on a few weeks back that shared a lot about slave cemeteries in Bethesda that have been uprooted.
Dr. Marsha Coleman Adebayo.
Yes.
Yes, I am familiar with that.
What can be done, and what policies would you encourage in changing that situation? I believe she did get a favorable ruling from the court, but where do things stand? And how is it that these slaves burial sites could be uprooted with such dismissiveness?
And we got to remember, County Executive Mark Elridge is the one who did this. So let's call him what he is. He has done it purposely. He does not care about our existence in civil rights, because he said he would never do this to a Jewish site, but he does this to an African American site. So I guess we'll go back to, I just want to make people know that Mark Elridge is the reason why that has happened. Go ahead, Max.
Okay, well, before Max answers, I don't even know if Max could answer that question, because it's actually a county issue, like you just pointed out, Paul, as opposed to a state issue. I know one question that we always have, being that this is you be the judge, and we have Claudia Barber there who has run for judge, and we have me who is running for judge. We want to ask, since you will be in the Senate, we are speaking it into existence, since you will be in the Senate, how you would vote if there is a proposed bill, like there have been many, many times, to amend the Maryland Constitution to keep people who were not appointed by the governor to run for circuit court judge.
I will. Let's speak to that. I am, though, on the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition list, and so I do have some sense of what's going on there. I don't want to speak for Dr. Coleman Adebayo, because I think she's an amazing organizer and seems to have the situation far more in hand than I would have ever expected. But my understanding is that they did reach some sort of concession with County Executive Elridge. There was a process several months ago where they started trying to negotiate about the land. I think it's unfortunate, that it took as much organizing as it did to get the county to the table. But I'm glad that they are trying to negotiate. I also, to connect it back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, Reverend Barber. They got Reverend Barber to speak out on behalf of the organization. So that, I think, was also a turning point. The information that I have now is that I think that they are looking at moving the organizing to the Department of Justice. And I don't know how much of this I want to share here, because I don't know how public it is yet. But my understanding is that they are looking at Title VI, which is discrimination action in the Civil Rights Division based on hate crimes via desecration. So I don't know what's going to come of that. I think they're looking right now at how to move forward a complaint at that level, which I imagine might supersede the local negotiations they've been doing. So that's what I know about that. But I encourage everybody who's interested in the issue to get on the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition email list to stay up to date with this. It's really powerful local organizing. It shouldn't have to be done, but since it is being done, if you live in Montgomery County, you should definitely know what's happening with that coalition. Okay, and then to your question, Marilyn, this is what we discussed in person when we were together several months ago, right?
Oh, yes, that is correct. And if I could give a bit of a background for people who don't necessarily know about this issue. Well, Judge Barber, would you like to give the background for people who don't know about this issue, since you've been working on it so much longer than I have?
Oh, wow. Okay. So for several years, even prior to my running for judge on the circuit court in 2016, there were bills introduced to eliminate contested judicial elections. The history behind this is when Governor Marvin Mandel was governor, he issued an executive order creating judicial nominating commissions. What they are commissions that consist of bar association members as well as government appointees. And they get in a room and interview candidates and decide who to shortlist. That name is given to the governor. And most of the time, the governor can choose from that list. Poof, you're a circuit court judge, just like that. For 368 years in Anne Arundel County, the circuit court in Anne Arundel County had never, and I underscore this, never appointed an African American woman. So they were practicing exclusion ad nauseum. So when I challenged the system in 2016 by running in a contested judicial election, there was fierce opposition, and there was a continuation of bills getting introduced into the state legislature year after year after year. Some are cross-filed, but the bottom line was to eliminate contested judicial elections, only do it the Judicial Nominating Commission process way, which basically is a process where, number one, it's, you can practice exclusion and keep, courts, appointing them where the elite appoint the elite. And voters have no say in that other than affirming. It's like in the appellate level, you run in retention elections. There is no contested judicial election, but the trial court is very important because that's the entity that prosecutes all criminal felonies or adjudicates criminal felonies. And you have your jury trial. That's the only court in the entire state of Maryland. The circuit court is the trial court of general jurisdiction, and they cover so many things. They cover all jury trials. They start there, and they cover workers' compensation appeals and so on and so forth, and a large amount of cases: civil cases, criminal cases, contract cases, etc. This move, and they want to put on the voters this narrative that their spin on things is that that's the best system, and it's just not. As I've just mentioned before, statistic-wise, you can get commissions and form commissions to collectively practice exclusion year after year after year after year after year, which was the case in Anne Arundel County. So in Prince George's County, the voters have been outsmarting the system. When candidates run in contested judicial elections in Prince George's County and also in Charles County last year, they chose. The Prince George's County chose all the African American candidates. I don't care whether they were sitting judges or not sitting judges. The only exception was Kathy Surratt, who was a former ACLU attorney, but she was running for reappointment, so she got her 15-year term. But the upshot to all this is that they stopped introducing legislation, I think, in this session only that just passed. It maybe had been last year or year before last, but there had been an ongoing reviving of this House bill and Senate bill to eliminate contested judicial elections, turning them into retention elections. And it's largely sponsored by people who like to keep the system the way it is, and it has proven to largely benefit a certain segment of the population.
I just, Max, before you respond, I just wanted to say that they did introduce it last year because I testified against it and you had some technical difficulties. That's why you couldn't testify against it. And one of the sponsors of one of the bills was Kathleen Dumais. who is now a judge. And so I keep wondering whether she anticipated that this was going to happen and she just did not want any competition. But that being said, I saw it as voter disenfranchisement. So basically now voters have the right to vote for circuit court judges. And these people, like everybody else on the ballot, is qualified for the position that they are on the ballot for. However, if the bills that were proposed by Kathleen DeVay was passed, voters would no longer have the right to vote for people that they have the right to vote for now. So you could look at it as a form of, this is voter disenfranchisement. Am I going to support someone who's going to take the right away of voters to vote for someone that they now have the right to vote for?
Right now, every voter on this phone call will see Mary Lynn Pierre's name on the Montgomery County ballot. And they have the right, because she filed a certificate of candidacy, to check her box. Unfettered discretion. That's an amazing right, right there, to choose who you want to. Don't be giving me some list that you conjured up based on their connections and their opportunities. I don't need that. I don't need those people on the bench. So because sometimes they get it right, but sometimes they don't.
Go ahead, Fred. You have a question? Will? Could you say? He's going. He's coming. He's getting his mute button.
Okay. I just want to add that the Supreme Court decision in the Florida bar case says that the people of Florida had a system where there was no election of judges, and then they found deficiencies in that system, and they went to a system in which there was trial court judges had to be elected.
Thanks, Will. Yeah.
And I commend everyone to that Supreme Court decision, for the Florida bar case around 2005.
Max, we have some time left, but I want to know what are some of the things that you're focusing on with your campaign, or are you hyper-focusing on just being a good person, running a great race, to be in a good seat, to do good things for everybody?
Yeah, I like to be more specific than that. I don't think people want to vote for that. This is a very grassroots campaign, so I knock doors every day and talk with voters, face to face. I just got back from doing that. The things in my district that I'm focused on are, first and foremost is housing and the cost of living in Montgomery County. It's an absolute crisis. It's nationwide, but certainly in my districts. We have a really horrible situation where it's a very, multicultural little slice of Americana in our county. 1 in 3 folks who live in Montgomery County were born not in the United States. So we have a really vibrant population of first and second generation immigrant families. In many cases, these are folks who came here 20, 30 years ago, lived here far longer than I have. But this whole time they've been renting because it was never cheap to buy a home in Montgomery County. And what's happening now is as the housing market continues to overheat, we're seeing really serious displacement that is uprooting families who really have made their home for generations now in Montgomery County. And so there is this big battle at the county level around zoning and density and how we create more housing stock for people. For me, at the state level, the missing piece has been how do we deal with affordability for folks who live here now? And there are things the state can do. So we can do things like stabilize rents statewide. We did that on an emergency basis in Montgomery County, but that's going to expire. I want to bring that policy to the statewide level. There's several other states now that have statewide rent stabilization. It just means, it doesn't mean that a landlord, if you're renting out a single unit or something, you can still raise the rent, keep up with inflation, what have you, but you can't raise it 20% or 50%. You can't, juke the market to push people out of the place that they call home in order to make an even bigger profit. So we need to do that in Maryland. I also want to see us finally pass just cause eviction. Delegate Wilkins, District 20, just to my east, has been introducing that bill tirelessly. It's high time that it passes. It needs support in the Senate. And then the third leg of the stool on housing is really constructing more what's called social housing, mixed income, publicly owned housing that gets us out of the developer hamster wheel and into actually democratically controlled forms of housing where we, as a society can determine, hey, we need a lot more deeply affordable housing. Let's build deeply affordable housing, and we can raise the public money to do that at the state level. So that's the biggest thing.
You raise a great point about the housing, because America has shown that they got money to spend on anything they want to spend money on.
Exactly.
If you want to spend multi-billions of dollars and give it to Ukraine, you can.
You can.
If you can spend multiple billions of dollars on rescuing the country during a pandemic, you can. So it's about priorities, and it's about what priorities here. That then the same way you gave missiles, all kinds of foreign aid to Ukraine, the same way you can solve the housing crisis or the housing affordability crisis. You can, take over land and have developers build properties for people who are homeless.
So, but here's the thing, Max. They are saying affordability housing, and we have developers saying, I'll build affordability housing so they can get some type of passing of a bill. But out of the 80 units, they're only allowing 4 affordable units out of the 80.
That's crazy.
That's right.
That's crazy. And many people are like, but he, she, them, or they build affordable housing. They built 80 units. 4, it's not affordable housing.
And you're exactly right. That is a tremendous part of the issue. And, continuing to go back to the private sector to try to build our way out of the crisis in the private sector, we get the same result, right? So that's why I talk about social housing. This is a bill that already exists in the House. We have a framework in place. Again, we need help in the Senate to move it forward. But, the basic idea is that with progressive taxation at the state level, we can raise money at the state level that a place like Montgomery County, where I live, can borrow against to publicly finance publicly owned housing that is mixed income. So we still get to create, apartments at the market rate. Those apartments actually subsidize the deeply affordable apartments, so it's more financially sustainable over time. But all of those units are permanently held by the public. They aren't owned by private developers. They aren't subject to the whims of the market. And that is how we don't just build our way into an ever deeper crisis, but we build our way out of the crisis. I think it's a really, really important, mental shift for folks to make. We have, just like you said, Claudia, we have the resources, to build affordable housing. But when we keep trying to build it in the form of tax credits to private developers who then build those 4 units with 76 that are luxury rate, we're never going to get there. So that's, and I will also say, less people think I'm being pie in the sky about this. We actually have our first social housing development coming online in Montgomery County in White Oak.
Right.
We're going to have an amazing community. It's actually going to be age restricted, so it's senior housing in particular. But we're going to have 100 or more deeply affordable units for seniors in this White Oak development. But that's with, just a couple $1 million that the county scraped together and, figured out on its own. If the state will partner with places like Montgomery County and the rest of the state of Maryland and raise serious money at the state level, we can supercharge this program, and we can actually start to build enough units to deal with the homelessness crisis and deal with the affordability crisis.
Before we go, and again, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. We're here every Wednesday at 6 p.m. You can always get it on all your social media podcasts. But here's the thing I want to ask you. You don't have to quantify the type of person you're talking to. But as you're door knocking, there's some pushback when people give you, I'm not going for that. What are those conversations that you want to enlighten people that these are still what people believe out there? Because there are some that don't agree with you. There, hopefully many do and will vote for you, but the few that don't agree with you, the question is why wouldn't they agree, or why don't they agree? What is their argument?
I don't. 9 times out of 10, that person who doesn't want to talk is somebody who has given up on the idea that government cares about what's happening to them. I don't find a lot of, right wing, so to speak, pushback on these ideas. I think these are popular, fairly common sense ideas for people. But I do see people, who feel cynical or just despairing about the idea that the local government or any kind of government is actually serious about reaching them. What I tell people in that case, because I usually have about 15 seconds before the door shuts in front of me, all I say is, I feel just like you do a lot of the time. I understand how you feel. I want you to know I take no corporate money. I take no developer money. I take no utility money, and I never will. I'm grassroots funded only. And I really do believe that matters. And I really do believe that the things you feel about how government doesn't respond to you really do come back to who's on speed dial in too many of these legislative offices. It's the folks who cut the large checks. So sometimes that gets them to open the door back up. Sometimes they're like, I've heard that before too, give me a break. But it's the truth. So that's what I try.
Do you have an email that you that one can access you and get feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. I can put my email in the Zoom chat if that's okay. Is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, folks are more than welcome to reach me right there, and I'll put our website in too if you want to learn more about the campaign.
Yeah, you also have an event on Saturday.
I do, yeah. We have free ice cream and live music outdoors in Capitol View Park. I'll put the link in for that as well. Folks are more than welcome to join us.
Oh, thank you.
That should be a lot of fun.
This has been enlightening, very enlightening, because I didn't know much about this candidate and the jurisdictions that are covered. So I'm so glad that you came on board to share with us more about your candidacy. And
thank you for having me.
Yes, most definitely. It has
and
been very enlightening.
Sorry. One more thing before you go, Max. If you could repeat what the current senator has done and why this is one of the main reasons that you're running, because I really think that it's important. We say vote, and then we vote, and then we don't come back until the next election. So we have to vote and be able to speak to the people in power and say, this is not why we voted for you. Why would you do something like that when, the voters who voted for you don't want you to take such actions? So, Max, if you could do that.
I'll try to do it on one foot. There's a lot there. I will say, our website is max4senate.com, for like the number 4. And we actually put links to media stories about this race, some of which cover in more detail. So if folks want to do your own reading, I encourage you to check those out. But very, very briefly, the incumbent that I'm running against is the vice chair of a very powerful committee in the Senate called Judicial Proceedings. And he has used that position to trade favors and to undermine a number of progressive priorities. So around police reform, he was, every Republican's favorite Democrat on police reform. He voted with Republicans to try to stop that bill, and he gutted a great deal of it. He killed the Inclusive Schools Act, and actually, I think he killed it again this session. I still got to look into it. That would have protected the civil rights of gay and trans students in our school system, including in the boost and the voucher system. My opponent, is someone who, my district runs along the Capitol Beltway. There's a lot of opposition here to the Beltway expansion. I live, 200 yards from the Beltway. You can bet I'm opposed to it. I'm terrified about what's going to happen to my community. My opponent has not, agreed to oppose the expansion. And in fact, he's taken money from the lobbying firm hired by the private company that's going to own those toll roads. So there's a pattern of conduct here where my opponent is one of the best funded Democrats in the state of Maryland. Folks are scared to run against that. But there's consequences for being that well funded, and the consequences that, you vote the way that your donors ask you to vote all too often. So I encourage folks to look into it more. Check out our website. You can read more there.
And this is Molly Hauk. I'm going to have a meet and greet for Max on May 15th, 4 to 6, if anyone would like to come, in Kensington.
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly, for having Max. It's important that we stay in contact with good people, with good policy and good procedure. Max, welcome home. That's what I can say with You Be the Judge. Welcome home. Thank everyone for listening to You Be the Judge. Again, we're here every Wednesday. We'll see. You're always welcome back, Max, to just pop in anytime you want. And then we can also give you another form. Again, I would love to have that. And also for your other candidates that are running that you align with, bring them with you, almost like a field trip. And we can talk about policy that's going to happen and policy that isn't happening. We really appreciate you. Thanks, everyone. And have a great night. Be kind, compassionate, and love.